Sage, Neil, take it away for your thoughts on Death Stranding.
All right. So, Death Stranding is a game that, frankly, there is no game like Death Stranding at all. Just in terms of themes, in terms of what the actual gameplay is, how the story is presented, is it's very much a Hideo Kojima game. So you can expect the crazy artistry, the what the hell is going on moments, and all that. But there's also a real heart to it, and for all the things Death Stranding does that is so against the grain, the heart is what people are going to remember it for.
There's an earnestness in what Kojima does that whether you like it or not, you can tell that he is like 100% believing in his own ideas and trying to execute them to their fullest. Whether that's working for someone on an individual level, I feel like that's going to be like, do you like David Lynch movies? That's sort of that sphere of question. But for me personally, it's something that does work. Now, I won't say in literally every moment does it work, but I vibe very much with what he's going for in this whole world. And I don't know if so Neil, I don't know if you're someone that was more for the gameplay and less for the story, or more for the story and less for the gameplay. I've heard reactions that are any kind of combination of those. But for me, the gameplay of this is honestly, and it has its slow moments, and I think pacing is one of my bigger criticisms of the first game. But overall, I do think that there's sort of a sublime, almost serenity that sets in when this gameplay system is kind of firing on all cylinders.
That's what makes Death Stranding so unique as a game, is the fact that, when you really break it down, Death Stranding is about walking to, new destinations, and literally traversing the environment is the gameplay of Death Stranding. And there's a real calm artistry and, so, like you said, serenity to that gameplay loop. And there's literally no other game that has this kind of thought and kind of experience to go with it. I will agree, if I have to criticize the actual gameplay, is that I do think with this first game, it is a bit too clunky for its own good sometimes. Like, you'll be walking around and, like, you'll have, there's a system where you have to manage the weight of the cargo you carry on your back, and you have to navigate the terrain to make sure you're walking on even terrain and all that. There'll be times where you're just walking in a relatively straight line, and then Norman Reedus will, like, just totally, flip out and, like, acting like, he's about to collapse, when you're just like, I'm just walking in a straight line. What are you talking about? And unfortunately, there are moments like that throughout the gameplay experience that, do unfortunately get in the way, but it was never enough to, like, hinder my enchantment and engagement with the game as a whole.
No, I'd say the same. And then one other spot in the gameplay too that I do think can be a little clunky is, and part of this is me saying this after seeing how they improved upon and just streamlined certain things in the second game. But in the first one, you go down to like these rest spots, right, to kind of restore your health and refresh and everything before you go out on your next mission. And uh so to fight there's all these spirit creatures, BTs is what they call them in the game, that you have to fight, and you have to like you have to go take a shower, use the bathroom, and then they'll like produce grenades based on that. And that's not the only weapon in the game, but sometimes it did feel like, all right, I got to hit all these button prompts every time I go rest. And sometimes I feel like that could just get just a little monotonous. Again, it's not like a huge detractor. I'm still a big fan of this game, but sometimes I feel like you end up having to do it over and over again. And some of that I feel like, well, I could just go rest and you could just kind of you could just do the one thing and you could just kind of refill the stuff automatically, which I think would be just a little bit smoother.
I definitely agree with that. Like the first game definitely has like a clunk problem in general. Like whether it's like some of the story sequences, as engaging as they are, sometimes they go on a bit too long. They're a bit too wordy, and some of the dialogue is not great in hindsight. But additionally, like you said with the gameplay, there's a little too many there's too many button prompts at points. The inventory is a bit too cluttered, and that like kind of hindered my like enjoyment of the combat and traversal at points. But like but yeah, like it is one of those hindsight is 2020 kind of things, because like you see the second game and how much better literally every one of those things is, and then you kind of just say like, oh yeah, this first game kind of has like rough draft syndrome on it a little bit.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that's a good way to describe it.
Question. So, I don't know if you guys have maybe said it already. What is the story of Death Stranding? What is going on?
All right, Sage, you take this away. I want to hear what your interpretation of it is.
Okay, so I'll just try and make it as straightforward as I can. Basically, we're working off of the like afterlife rules of Egyptian mythology here. And at some point in the past, there was a breach between the worlds of the living and the dead, and spirits are effectively made of antimatter, and living people matter. And when these things touch each other, it creates like like when people make a joke of like a black hole happening, right? Because of two things that are so opposed coming together. It's almost like that sort of explosion, right? And so the world is in just disarray because anybody touches one of these things just annihilates a city, right? And that also caused a I feel like I sound crazy describing it, but it also started causing time rain or time fall, they call it. So
Mhm.
this rain comes down and ages anything it touches, right? So between ghosts being everywhere and rain that makes you age, all of society has retreated into like underground cities, basically. In these like small areas. People don't go outside. They don't like interact with each other physically, which everybody thought was silly in like November of 2019, which will never not be funny. The hindsight that this game had.
Right.
Um, but so that's your setup for why the world is the way it is. Like there's no internet anymore, right? And so then you, Norman Reedus, are basically tasked with going out and rebuilding or creating a new type of internet or something similar to an internet. And so there's the obvious themes of connection come in there, people being connected, society being connected, what those connections and the values of that are, what the drawbacks are too. That's also an interesting topic that gets brought up.
Right.
Maybe more in the second one than the first one, but still, I think it's very present. Um,
It's a the themes are very universal. Like what you're describing is kind of a crazy scenario, let's be real, but at the same time the themes of like connecting people or reestablishing connections and like realizing the importance of like communities and society as a whole is, it's a very universal theme. And however crazy way it is presented, is something very kind of provocative, I think, for the game.
Absolutely.
Mm, okay. And you take control over Sam Porter. Sam Porter there. Sam Porter Bridges is played by Norman Reedus, who people might know Norman Reedus, Daryl Dixon on The Walking Dead,
Mhm.
and Daryl Dixon on The Walking Dead. He was also there. Well, also he's got the Boondock Saints. He's got that. People also might know that.
He had some show about motorcycles, I think, too, right?
Yes, he did do that as
He
well.
kind of strikes me as a motorcycle guy, just in general.
Yeah. So, is this kind of the first time in kind of a Hideo Kojima game? Because he uses a lot of very famous actors in this game, people who have not done video games maybe prior. Is this the first time he's done that before with this Death Stranding?
Well, Kiefer Sutherland came in and played Venom Snake in the Phantom Pain and Ground Zeroes. But before that, I don't remember any like. Well, actually, no, because we did recently find out that I forget her name, but the voice actress from Ariel for The Little Mermaid, the original actress, played a major character back in Metal Gear Solid 3. So that's
Mhm.
the first time that happened, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, I mean, David Hayter, certainly not like a Hollywood movie star, but his name's out there.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, he's mostly known for being a writer. Like he wrote the first two X-Men movies and Zack Snyder's Watchmen movie. But yeah, you are right that Kiefer Sutherland was sort of like as far as like big known names, Kiefer
yeah.
Sutherland playing Venom Snake was the first one that really Kojima did that with.
And then in this game, you got famous actors there. You got Mads Mikkelsen is this. You have Mark Qualley. I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Leah
Sadu.
Sadu
Sydney.
in this as well. You also have some directors in this as well. You have Guillermo del Toro there. Guillermo del Toro. There you got him. You got Nicholas Winding Refn in this as well. Is it distracting to have any of these kind of actors in the game?
See, I found it distracting in Metal Gear Solid 5 because I knew what Snake looked and sounded like, and it wasn't Kiefer Sutherland. So I did find it distracting in that game. But these are all original characters crafted for these actors to play. At least that's how it feels to me. So I never found it distracting in these. I mean, yes, are they famous faces and names, yes, but at the same time, it's such an off the wall story and the context they're being presented in that for me, any sort of like weird tone that they bring is intentional. I think it's just part of the just very weird world and the presentation of it that he's going for.
Well, and plus they're just such strong actors that like I think with lesser talents it would have been distracting. But the fact that
Yeah.
Margaret Qualley and Leia Seydoux and Mads Mikkelsen and all these guys, even Troy Baker who plays the villain, they're such good actors that you don't really. It's not distracting at all. I don't think. What is more distracting is the fact that some of their names, the character names, are a little on the nose to say the least. Like there's a guy whose name is literally Die Hard Man. Like, come on. I like it, but come on, man.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, there's a few examples of that. I mean, and even some of the Metal Gear games have some names like that too, if you go back and look at them. But yeah, they make me laugh. It's some of the weirdest because again, they're so literal and they're so direct. Uh, but then at the same time, the actors will put a performance in, and by the time like you're done experiencing that character, they kind of win you over. Even at
Like,
least for me, they win me over with the name even a little bit.
like Die Hard Man, like he is that guy that plays Die Hard Man is acting his ass off in this game. So like
Yeah, he gives a speech in kind of the closing hours of the game that I thought was like, wow, that's like one of the best like monologues I feel like I've seen an actor get in a video game.
yeah, it's up there for sure.
And this is the character right here, correct? Oh, hold on, let me show them there.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and it's, Tommy Earl Jenkins who
Yes,
plays.
that guy.
Yeah,
Um,
he knocks it out of the park. He's got one of the best performances in the game just because of what the screen time they give him, especially near the end. And to just cap off the actors, Troy Baker was mentioned, but also this is, as far as I'm aware, the only game where Troy Baker's actual face is used. Normally, he's voicing a role like Joel in The Last of Us or Booker in Bioshock, and, a ton
Um,
of things. Right, he's been in everything, but as far as I'm aware, this is the one game where it's actually his face being used. So he stands alongside all these other actors, and it's fully him in the
I think
presentation.
you're I think you're right because like the only thing I can think of is like was Ocelot's face in Metal Gear 5 his face or is it just
I
mocap?
don't think so. I think that was more based off of like just like the way the character looked in the other games.
Fair, fair.
okay. And this is
That's
Troy Baker.
that was kind of unique and different for him.
Right.
Yeah, very My Chemical Romance. Very nice.
Well,
Um,
and with the goofy over the top names, this character is referred to as Higgs, like the Higgs boson God particle.
mm,
Oh my god. I did not make that connection at all.
So it's totally that type of goofy thing. It's all over, right? It's Kojima's fingerprints everywhere on the thing. And I don't know how much more story I can truly explain. It's because there's so much and it's so wordy. It's not really a Kojima game without a bit of that word salad in there, but uh, you are basically given this job to reconnect everything um, by your dying mother, the president. um, I know it sounds ridiculous just to say it even to myself, but uh, and then you have a sister who is kidnapped by the Higgs character, and then it starts to get vastly weirder from there. Also, people can't normally see these ghosts, right? Or beach things is the full. Again, there's also a lot of like made up terms, and then there's acronyms for those terms, and so then you have these made up acronyms, and then like a glossary of like, all right, what does that mean again? There's all sorts of things like that. But
Right.
you basically have to take one of these babies in a battery jar and plug an electronic umbilical cord into them. That lets you see the ghosts. Then you throw your grenades made out of your, blood, pee, shower remnants, and you throw those at the ghosts. And that's how the combat system works here.
Let me see if I can pull up some combat scenes here. There,
Yeah.
but you got that with the collector's edition there.
Yeah, this is part of the collector's edition of the first game. I'll leave this out sometimes if I have company over and I know that people don't know what this is. I'll leave it on like a shelf somewhere, and I've seen people look at it, then look back at me and not say anything. And I could tell they were like looking at it, but they're like not sure if they want to ask.
It's an attention grabber. I'll give you that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely is.
I have here, so I got the first boss fight. I don't know if you want me to show that. Maybe that exemplifies some of the combat
Yeah,
here.
that's early enough in the game.
Yeah.
That's not going to like
Okay,
spoil anything crazy.
Yeah. Go
okay,
for it.
I'll show this. It doesn't show. I don't think it'll show maybe him throwing the baby juice or the grenade juice there, but
Oh, that actually is a boss from the second game.
Yeah.
oh,
We,
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
the second one.
Oh, sorry about that.
I was about to say. Like,
Let me see if I can pull up one for the first one there. But in the
And that's
meantime,
one thing. Also, oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead.
I was just saying. So one thing while you're pulling it up about the combat too is I think you get a few tools for sure, but I will also say that, and I think the boss fights are a lot of fun in the first game, but I do think there's a lot of them that they're very similar. Like there's
mm.
only a couple different types of bosses, and you fight a lot of them multiple times. And I don't think that ever necessarily like was like wearing my patience thin, but I could maybe see other people having that problem.
Yeah, so the bosses are mainly the BTs, which come in the form of like these animals. Like you'll fight, like a whale or a dolphin or something like that. That is a beach thing, a BT. And then the other bosses are like more humanoid scale. They're more like skirmishes at like these bandit camps essentially that you come into. And yeah, I did find the combat, the combat is again a kind of a victim of the clunk of the first game, where like just the user interface is just not very conducive to be reactive to combat, and it did
Yeah.
kind of deter me from like engaging in it as much as I could have. But at the same time, I can't deny that like when you actually get into boss fights, mainly with the BTs and the mandatory story fights, it was
Yeah.
really enjoyable just because like the mechanics made sense in those scenarios. It just didn't really feel like it made sense a lot of the time in the open world traversal segments.
And some of the kind of story-based boss sequences, especially in like the kind of last act of the game, some of those I think are really great. But of course, they're very specially designed around like unique mechanics that are only in those moments. But those moments I think are all really, really well done.
Oh,
So
they
this,
are.
the stuff he's throwing, so that's the stuff you're talking about right there. The stuff he's throwing
So
there.
it's you have blood grenades, pea grenades, shit grenades, and collections of what's left over after you shower grenades.
Okay.
Ghosts don't like those things.
Yeah, it's like there's a lore reason for it, but it's like they don't like being contacted with like the like people and things of that nature.
Oh,
Yeah, it's like the viscera of the living sort of a thing.
gotcha. Okay. Um, and so what was he kind of thinking with this game as far as the concept kind of goes there, Hideo Kojima there?
So it was funny because I remember when there was probably one, maybe two trailers for this, and there was just kind of hype building, and no one knew what was going on. And people would ask him like, "Well, so what is the game?" And he would go, "Well, video games are made with sticks. I want to make a game about ropes." And he would just kind of walk away, and people would be like, "I don't know what that means." But in hindsight, when you actually get your hands on the game and you experience it, what he's saying does make a lot of sense.
It does.
And he's always tried to make games that put some sort of pressure on the player or reward the player for engaging in non-violent solutions to problems. That's always true with Metal Gear, right? It's always more about stealth than it was about action. But with this, I think he goes even further. I mean, you can't even like kill an enemy without having to worry about one of those big explosions happening and taking out like a whole piece of the map, right? So you were trying to avoid actually like killing an enemy at all costs if possible. And I think it's really just about, I mean, like with the whole kind of new internet thing that you put together in the game, it's almost trying to create a like social media situation where people can only interact positively with each other. I think that's a big part of what Kojima is going for.
Yeah, if I had to play armchair psychologist, I just think that he wanted, he had spent so many years making Metal Gear games, which are like, games about like espionage and, high octane action and those kind of things. And I think he just wanted to make something that's fundamentally different from not only Metal Gear, but just a lot of games in general. And I think he very much succeeded because, like, the whole point of Death Stranding at the end of the day is about connecting societies and people and ideas and cultures. Like you said, there's a whole social media aspect about giving likes to, we haven't even talked about this, but there's like a building component where like you can build structures like roads and bridges and, power generators to help players, traverse the environment. And I think he just wanted to create a game that's about not only connections, but just helping people you don't meet. Because, like, you know, to quote the musical Hamilton, your legacy is a garden that you'll never see the fruits of. And I think he wanted to make a game about you making gardens that you never see.
Mm, okay.
No, that's 100% true. And just to add to that, I think that is when you most like you can look at the game and the premise and read a synopsis and see some cutscenes and you can get like, okay, this is kind of the idea he's going for. But when you actually like are in the game and you're driving a vehicle to try and get somewhere and the battery runs out and there just happens to be a power generator close to where you are that someone left behind, or you put a bunch of resources into building a road structure to get from like one city to another safely and not having to go over like a mountain, and you see slowly contributions come in from other players and then yourself, and these things come into existence. There's a feeling of satisfaction that comes from like a communal effort being put forward, that I think that feeling is what he's trying to give people. And that's something that I feel like you can only really fully understand by from playing the game. And you can be told that that's the idea, but there's something special that I just haven't seen any other games do by creating that sensation.
It's kind of beautiful in that you gain so much just by being nice to people. Like, I can't even count the number of times I drove a fully armored, carrier truck with a lot of supplies that was built by another player that, like, I didn't have the resources for, and just how satisfying it was to think that, like, this other player helped me out, and in turn I'm gonna leave a zip line so that you can cross these mountains easier. It's a really special feeling, and there's just, I cannot think of a single game that has this kind of experience. It's really one of a kind.
Mm. And you mentioned some people were maybe a little deterred from playing this game, as far as like maybe this is not my type of thing. It's a little weird. And like you said, people also said like, oh well, it's just a lot of walking. I don't feel like doing all this walking. Kind of, it's a walking simulator. Um, do you think there has to be like what gamer do you think that this game appeals to?
Ooh, it, hmm. Because I feel like it is a new genre. It is kind of a new invention. Like there's a sim aspect to it, but I feel like it really is a new type of thing that it's kind of carving out its own new, fan for what this is doing. Certainly, some of the weirdness of Metal Gear, some of that's in here, and maybe that'll appeal to some people. But I don't know if there's any other game that you could go like, do you like this? Then you definitely like this. I just don't know if that you can really make that sort of recommendation with this series now. Maybe more so with the second one, but I think with the first one, I didn't really even recommend like to a lot of my friends and stuff to actually play it because I was like, I just don't know if you'll like it. It is weird and it is different. But if you're interested in experimental storytelling and just someone that again is just very earnest and is just trying to genuinely provide you a new type of experience and not kind of rehash things all the time, it's worth giving a try. I think for that reason. Um, we mentioned earlier that the pacing can be a little slow at times, like between maybe certain major story events and early parts of the game. It could take a little while to get going, but I think it really does reward you for sticking through it.
As far as like the game recommendations, I'm going to actually take this question in a different route. I think if you're interested in auteur artist theory, I think that
Mm.
those are the people that are going to appeal to this game because like Kojima is an auteur. Like he's in the same school as like David Lynch or like a Hideaki Anno or a Hayao Miyazaki, where like his signature is so distinct that like I think people who are interested in like really daring artistic experiments and interpretations of gameplay mechanics will be really interested in it. I mean, I can't guarantee you'll enjoy it because frankly there were points in this game where I didn't enjoy the act of playing it, but at the same time the atmosphere, the music, the overall ideas and the big picture concepts are so fascinating that like I think the people who are interested in Arturus theory will be the ones that are most like enthralled by this.
Hmm.
Well, and I also I think it's interesting too to bring up the just this idea that like are video games art? I think yes, right? I would say totally. Um, Now then the second question is, does art of any medium always have to be fun for it to be good? And I would say no. And so and sometimes I think there's clunkiness that could just be designed better. And when we eventually talk about the second game, I can totally get into how I think they do, fix a lot of the problems of the first game. But even that being said, I think video games are a piece of media that people expect to always be fun first. And I think to grow it as an art form, which I think this is a game that actively does and pushes, I think you have to be willing to kind of settle in sometimes for something not necessarily being fun. Like there's lots of film that is great film, some of the best film ever made, but it's not necessarily fun to watch, and that might be because of the subject matter, the emotions it's trying to process through. It might not be fun to watch a really sad movie, but that
Right.
doesn't mean it's not good. And I think with video games, I think people just look for like this very immediate fun interactivity, and it's not wrong to do that, but I think to allow the whole medium to grow artistically, there has to be room for things to not always be fun, or the purpose of it isn't always to be fun.
I completely agree. Like even bouncing off of video games in this example, like Spec Ops: The Line is not necessarily a fun game because of the subject matter, yet it's a really engrossing piece of art. And like not to derail it, but like Last of Us 2 is not necessarily a fun game to play because of its subject matter, but like say what you will about it, it gets artistic reactions from people. So like I fully agree that like video games are art, and I think part of it is the fact that you have to experiment with experiences that aren't the typical norm. Like, and this is just, you know, prime example of like artistry within the interactive video game medium.
Mm. Okay. In this game, we'll talk about the sequel later on there as well. With that, as Sage mentioned with that, but this first game also got generally positive reviews there. Says here critics praised the voice acting, soundtrack, and visuals of it. It got more mixed opinions regarding its gameplay and story, but it was still nominated for numerous amount of awards there. It says by July 2021, the game had sold 5 million copies worldwide.
Mm.
And then people like Sage mentioned also compared it to what was going on currently at the time when this game was released in November 8th, 2019, when the COVID pandemic came months later. So a lot of people had the time there for that.
I saw so many people at that time be like, I don't like this. This is weird. It's lame. I don't like how I don't like playing this. And then like 5 months later, they were like, I really get what they're going for now.
Kojima is Nostradamus. Like, it's kind of scary how accurate he is. Like, the entire plot of Metal Gear Solid 2 predicts the rise of like fake news and internet misinformation. The entire plot of MGS4 is about the war economy and like war profiteering. So it's crazy how on the pulse he is at points.
The original game is about like cloning and genetics and stuff, and that game came out like, I think almost exactly 1 year before we actually cracked the human genome.
Right. It was right after Dolly the Sheep was made.
At the Game Awards, it was nominated for Game of the Year, Best Game Direction, Best Narrative, Best Art Direction, Best Score Music, Best Audio Design, Best Performance, Mads Mikkelsen, Best Performance, also Norman Reedus, Best Action Adventure Game. It won 3 of these. It won Best Game Direction, Best Score and Music, and Best Performance, Mads Mikkelsen there. Do you know what won Game of the Year in 2019?
It wasn't Sekiro, was it?
Yes, it was. It was Sekiro twice there. This was a good year. You had Sekiro, you had Control, you had Death Stranding, you had The Outer Worlds, and you had Resident Evil 2 up for Game of the Year.
Oh boy, that is a pretty solid lineup for Game of the Year nominees.
By April 2025, Death Stranding has reached over 20 million players worldwide. And it ended up turning a profit there, so they were able to secure the funding for Kojima's next project, which was Death Stranding 2. Go around, get you guys' final thoughts and rating for this Death Stranding. Neal, what's your final thoughts and rating?
Death Stranding is a real artist piece, in interactive form. It's not something I can confidently say everyone will enjoy equally, but even despite its flaws, like we talked about, like just general gameplay issues that seem more like just oversights rather than deliberate decisions, it's such a unique experience that I cannot, it's just fantastic. Not perfect, but I do think this is peak gaming for sure. You will never play another game like this, and it's a testament to artistic expression in interactive mediums.
What about you, Sage?
I'm right there. Peak for me as well. You're not going to get it anywhere else other than with this guy and with his games. Even his other games are not this. It's just so different in its own thing. And yeah, it's not going to work for everybody. It even might not work for most people. It's very not mainstream. But for me, the just kind of quirky weirdness of Kojima just works for me. And I can let a lot of the like gripes that I do have go in favor of what is working. And I think, again, it rewards you for your time. The longer you stick with it, the more you do get out of it. Anybody that quit in the first 10 hours, I'd be like, yeah, I can see why maybe you didn't get to anything that like you thought was like really, really amazing, because it does kind of hold back and wait. And that is a pacing criticism. But yeah, it's a special experience. And I'll never forget playing it that first time. And I will continue to revisit it over the years, I think.
Yeah.
And how long is this game? How long does it take place?
Ooh, gosh, I'd probably put at least 100 hours in there.
I think my
see,
story,
what's like the
I think my story playtime was around 50 hours, like doing a couple side quests, but mainly focusing on the story.
Yeah. So
yeah,
this is the
yeah,
main
something like
story
that.
is 40 to 45 hours if you want to play that. If you want to completionist, if you want to finish everything, apparently it's 80 to 120 hours. It's not too bad there. Did you play the director's cut, or did you all go on to play that, or you just played the regular edition?
So I played it on launch when it first came out, but I did go back and play the director's cut updates, and they were actually really nice. It's a lot of stuff that it does fix some of the complaints that I might have had about the initial game, just maybe certain like we only briefly mentioned, but there are some human enemies in the game where they'll like steal packages. They have like these bandit camps that you can go and get things from, and some of the stuff in the director's cut some new weapons and tools that just made combat with those human enemies a lot more engaging. Added a like very Metal Gear inspired mission where you sneak into a warehouse. There's like a racetrack, gun ranges for like practice combat stuff. The director's cut feels like it's testing a lot of ideas for how to evolve to and how to
Right.
add new things to the second game. But because it's like a test, they're not as like integrated, of course, as they actually are into. So they're there and they're fun and they are an improvement, but they're also maybe just slightly scatterbrained at the same time.
Yeah, I played the original PS4 version, and I only played a little bit of the director's cut, and pretty much what you said. Like they add a couple weapons and a couple more structures that you will see in Death Stranding 2, and it does improve the original game, but like you said, it's not fully fleshed. It's not fully fleshed out yet, like it is in 2. One thing I will say though, the bullet gun is the best weapon in the entire game. Like just it's
Mm.
I love stealth games, and just the bullet gun, most satisfying weapon in the entire game.
You feel like Batman in the cartoons anytime he wraps people up.
Well, then maybe that's why I love it so much. It's basically just like the bat rope gun, basically.
Mm. Okay, very nice there. And then this game, with the price on it now, I wonder if it's had a sale since the sequel is out right now.
I would be surprised if it doesn't.
I'll look it up real quick.
Let's see here. So I see here on the PlayStation website, you can get it for $60. That's the director's cut. On Steam, I'm looking at it right here. It says, "Oh, okay, so you can get the director's cut for $16.99.
Oh,
Oh, that's a steal.
You get for 16, right? So this ends July 10th. So people got a few days there. Hopefully, you see this review in time before the sale is over. But yeah, so you can get it. That's pretty good. $16.99 for the director's cut of this game. It's a pretty good deal.
play
And I
some.
mean, the game is 6 years old now too, so I think it's probably going to show up on most sales throughout the year, like at least all the big holiday ones.
Right. Play some good art, people. Play some good art.
So there's that. Okay, so people, if you want to play it on Steam, you can get it at $16.99. But if you want to play it on console, looks like you have to get it for $60 there if you want to get it on still on console there. If you want to do that. Very cool there. So 2 peaks from Neal and Sage for Death Stranding.